Hey everyone and welcome back. So in today's lecture, we'll be discussing about infrastructure as a code. Now, infrastructure as a code, which is also referred as the IAC solution, are one of the must-know tools in the DevOps artillery. Primarily because nowadays most of the startups and even enterprises are now moving to the infrastructure as a code-based approach. So due to its importance and due to the advantages that it provides in an organization, let's go ahead and understand infrastructure as a code in a very high level overview, and subsequently we'll be discussing in depth about this specific technology. So generally, whenever you develop an infrastructure, there are two ways in which you can build it. One is by manually creating the infrastructure. So you go to the AWS console, you manually click each and every section like instance type, security group, IAM rules, etc. And then you create the infrastructure. And second is through automation. So automation is where you write a simple script. It may be AWS CLI, it may be an Ansible role, or it may be through CloudFormation. So there are always two ways. So industry is now moving towards the way of automation because it reduces the amount of manual work and the amount of errors that one might make during the manual creation of infrastructure. So let's go ahead and understand more about infrastructure as a code and why exactly the industry is moving there. So we are taking an example of a single service. So we have a single service. So let's assume that this is a single service in the development environment. Now within this, you have few EC2 instances, you have a load balancer, you have a MySQL RDS database, and you have the S3 bucket. So if you know, this is somewhat like a three-tiered architecture. So there are four services that we are using. Now if you manually create these services, it will actually take at least few hours for creating a load balancer, creating auto scaling groups, all of those things, then creating a RDS database, connecting EC2 instance to the RDS database, and so on. It will take at least few hours, if not a day, for this environment to be built. Now, once this environment is built in the development environment, definitely there will be a need in the future that similar replica should be built in the staging environment as well. So now you have the staging environment where you need to build the similar replica. Now, after staging environment is tested and everything is working fine, again the requirement will come where you have to build a similar replica environment in production as well. So this is just an example of a single service. So if you manually go ahead and create the infrastructure in development, create the infrastructure in staging, then in production, it will be at least a waste of a day or two. And this is what the industry wants to move ahead with. So what you can do is, instead of manually creating all of these infrastructure, instead of that, what you can do is you can write a template. It can be a CloudFormation template which creates this specific infrastructure. And then if you want to put it in staging, all you will have to do is you have to run or rerun the CloudFormation template, and you have the entire infrastructure ready for you. And this is just an example of single service. So whenever you move to enterprises where they have hundreds of services, doing things manually is not a right way. And this is the reason why industry is now moving towards the way of automation. So there are few advantages, or I would say benefits, of infrastructure as a code. One is the reusable code. So reusable code, as in if I write a code which would develop this kind of an environment, I can reuse that entire code to develop the similar environment in staging and similar environment in production. So that is what is referred as reusable code. Second is managing infrastructure via source control. So you can actually put it in Git repository and you can have the version control. And third is enable collaboration. So within this type of infrastructure, a person A can write infrastructure related to EC2 instance. Person B can create the load balancer, person C can create the MySQL database, and person D can create S3 buckets. So this is what is called as the enable collaboration. So this is the theoretical part. Let's do some practical, because practical is something that will help us understand in much more detail. So we have a simple use case where you have a use case where you have to deploy a highly available LAMP stack. So LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL and PHP. So you have to create a highly available LAMP stack. So what are the components which will be part of this LAMP stack? Let's understand. So first it would be an application load balancer. So when you create an application load balancer, you will have to create a listeners and you have to create a target groups. Now, once you create an application load balancer, you have to create an auto scaling. So within auto scaling, you have launch configurations, you have auto scaling groups. This is one. Then you also have to work with user data scripts because you have to install Apache and PHP in the EC2 instances which gets launched. Along with that, since this is a highly available infrastructure, you have to work with RDS databases which are based on multi-AZ, and then you also have to work with security groups. So if you try to do these things manually, I'm sure it will at least take few hours for you to correctly deploy all of these infrastructure manually. So what we'll be doing in today's lecture, we will be deploying the entire infrastructure based on code. So AWS provides a infrastructure as a code solution called as CloudFormation, which allows us to codify the infrastructure and then we can deploy the infrastructure based on code that we have written.